Welcome to the Self-Awareness and Self-Compassion Podcast, formerly known as the Full Spectrum Feeling Podcast. I'm your host, Blaise Schwaller, life coach, mom, and former tattoo artist. I help people heal their past, speak their truth, and love the lives that they're living now. Join me here every week for conversations on how to live an imperfect but fully engaged life that embraces all the feels so that you can stretch into your best life while enjoying the you that's here right now. When you think about visibility, how visible you are in your life, what do you think about? And how do you think about yourself showing up in your life? Are you showing up? How are you showing up? And is that very visible? What does that mean to you? What is its impact on you and the people around you? And what do you want from it? So I'm about to dive into this with some people in my life that I care a lot about. And the question that they have for me is, how do I get more visible in my business or in my life? And how do I let in more abundance? And I've been thinking about this really deeply. So my thoughts before having this big powwow with them, I'm going to share them now because I want to feel through it on my own and see where I'm at. So the first question I have about visibility is, what is it that you want to present? Or how are you presenting yourself? How are you showing up? Are you hiding? And if you are, why? If you're showing up, why? And how? And all of those questions, I don't know, they have like a lot of different layers to them, doesn't it? To say, okay, how am I showing up in my life? So if I look at myself, I say I show up and I make sure that I'm there when I say I'm going to be there. So I think I'm showing up reliably. Am I showing up enough? Is like the next question that shows up in my noggin. And in some areas I'd say, sure, yeah, I'm showing up quite a lot. In other areas I think maybe I think I'm showing up enough, but maybe it's not enough. Maybe I need to be more visible or make more offers or just be out in the world a little bit more than I am. That's interesting. Why? Why is that? And if I feel like I'm not showing up enough, why is that? So then I have to get into the feelings of it. So if you're going along on this ride with me, I invite you to just join me in questioning all of this stuff. How are you showing up and why? How do you feel about that? And I think when I perceive myself as not showing up enough, if that's the judgment that I've made, it's usually because I feel like I am unsure of my value. I'm unsure of what I have to offer. And when I feel that I'm showing up the most and I'm actually being received, it's when I'm in a state of knowing my value in that interaction, of having something to share and offer. And honestly, all of the times that I show up the best or feel like I'm showing up the best, it's because my focus is not on me. And I started to think about this, about the people that I admire, the people like out in the media, celebrities, whatever, and how I perceive their presence and them showing up. And what's interesting is that I personally don't care, and I don't know why I ever would, like what they're doing in their personal life or whatever. The thing that I admire is their presence when they're showing up performing or delivering, like the movie, the music, whatever performance it is, or their art that they're delivering. Like that's what captures me. And that's the common denominator. And I think, okay, well, how am I doing that in my own life? Am I truly offering what I have to give without it being about me? Maybe like the stuff is moving through me. And when that happens, God, that's so much better. And it's so much less pressure. And it lets me show up. Like I like to show up for that. I like to be a conduit. And I notice that the people that I admire, that I perceive as showing up and being this big, powerful presence, like the Beyoncés of the world, when they are showing up like that, they are in their element. They are not doing it. Oh, it's interesting. I perceive that they're not necessarily doing it for their own gain, even if that's a part of it. Because the thing that I love about it is what they're delivering. It's what they are giving to the public, to the reader, to, the art collector, or whatever it is. It's what they've produced or offered. The offer seems like a really important part of this. And it's not so much that they're hiding underneath what they're offering, it's that the offer is true. When they have something valuable, when they have something that's moving through them to be offered, we're able to show up. Like we see them, we want to see them, it's easy to see them, we see that. Can we match that in our own lives? How cool of a question is that? So I'm wondering about that in my own life. Like, how can I show up to be received more? I know that when I started this whole year, one of the important questions I had for myself was what's the theme of this year? What's the important thing? And I went into like a meditative state, and the thing that I wanted the most was to be received. I want to be received. And what I've learned about that throughout this year is that being received has a lot to do with how open I am to giving. Like you can't be received if you're not giving anything. And that's so obvious. And yet at the same time, like there is such a hurt and pain in my heart about like, oh, I just don't feel like I'm being received. And I have so much to give. And yet here I am not giving it, I guess, or not knowing how to give it. And the whole year for me has been learning how to create opportunities in my life in which I can be received, in which I can be visible, in which I can be there. So that ties back into the visibility. Like, what would it take in order to be visible, to feel safe there, and I think ultimately to be received? And in exchange, I think that's where the abundance comes from, right? I think that all ties in together. Like, how much can you show up? How much are you able to be in your strength to give what you know is good and worthy and awesome about you and receive in return for that? And then it's this flow of visibility and abundance, and it's a back and forth. It's not separate from each other. And yet, the thing that we tend to focus on is what we want and what we feel is lacking. I want more abundance. I feel like people aren't seeing me. I feel like I'm not being received. And it's a really fascinating conundrum. How do we navigate that? To show up powerfully, to show up and have people want to pay attention to you can feel so vulnerable. That can be terrifying. It makes you feel very naked. Sometimes we're really afraid to be seen just for fear that what if they see me? What if they see me really and they don't like it and they don't want it? And something that I work on with many of my clients, and I work on myself with this too, is what if you show up and you're seen and you are who you are and they don't receive it and they don't see you and they just see what they were going to see anyway? Can that be okay? Whew. And again, I come back to the Beyoncés of the world and I'm like, you know what? They go up there and they put it all out on stage, and lots of people hate them. They definitely are rejected. Like, they are facing that in their art, in what they're delivering, in their creation, like just in their visibility. Because that's the other side of the coin too, is if we show up, if we make ourselves available, if we don't have all of those protective layers up, yes, some people are not going to like us, and they won't like us, and we'll feel it maybe more because we're like, oh shit, that's actually who I am, and they don't like it. And that seems very scary. And yeah, that doesn't necessarily feel a very safe thing to do. But on the other hand, no one can be there cheering for us and receiving us fully if we don't do that also. Because people can only reject or accept what they do see of us, what we do offer. And then it just becomes a matter of our choice. Do we want to offer more authentic, real connection, real opinion, real pieces of ourselves, real thoughts, real insights, real wisdom? Or do we only want to offer what we think is safe, what we're regurgitating from other people, the package that we've seen accepted before for others, or we've seen accepted by ourselves? Do we want to make ourselves smaller and less expansive in order, I don't know, to just like check that box more of the times that we know, like more of a percentage of the time people are going to say yes to this version of me. And yet when we do that, I think in our hearts, we don't feel received. We don't feel like we were seen. So it's a question that I guess we have to keep asking ourselves, and we have to keep reassessing. Is the way I'm showing up in the world authentic? Is this me being visible? How visible am I allowing my real self to be? How vulnerable am I willing to get? How safe can I be? Just thinking these thoughts, thinking of going public with any opinion, thinking of going public with who I really am, using my real voice, not hiding. Can I do that? And I honestly believe like the receiving that you get in return for that authenticity feels so much better than when we hide, than when we're afraid to even show up. And there's something so relieving, like in that vulnerability, being able to show up scared, being able to share that you're scared with people and have people truly accept and be there for you. And the fear is always that it's not going to happen. And sometimes it doesn't. And that's painful too. And then we have to do it for ourselves. Oh, snap. So that there's so many different layers to this question. And then, I'm going to return back to that question of abundance and what can we do to let in more, and everyone has this question about lack mentality and how do we get out of the mindset of lack? And I feel like it's getting tired and I'm tired of it. And I'm tired of it in part because I deal with it myself. Like everybody deals with this, where we're worried that we won't have enough. There's not enough to go around. We know we shouldn't do it. And yet there's the fear. There's the worry that maybe there's not going to be enough for me, or I'm not sure how to get it. So what do we do to get it? And often there then becomes this dissonance of, I'm going to show up in the way that I've been told because that seems like it's worked for other people and I want it to work for me too. I'm going to show up doing this. And when we try to force ourselves to show up that way, what happens is it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. It's not actually working for us. So we actually hide more and we stop being visible. I see these two things as so interconnected that the degree to which we're willing to show up has so much to do with authenticity and what we feel we're in alignment with and what we feel we're not in alignment with. And I'm wondering if the question that my friends have about this is visibility, is our ability to show up tied in with authenticity? Is it about always showing up authentically, or is it not? Because certainly, I've certainly seen people show up loudly and proudly, and they don't feel very authentic to me, and yet they're highly visible. And to me, it's off-putting. But I also can relate to the envy there of, oh, look at that person. Like, clearly they're being seen, they're loud, they're getting what they wanted out of it, they seem to be prosperous. But I also think that we have a lot of assumptions about that. We assume that that person is prosperous. We assume that they're having a great time. And honestly, maybe we're assuming that they're being unauthentic. Maybe they actually are. Maybe that's how they got there. Those are all interesting questions. And I'm not really sure all of my feelings about it, except that I have this, it's like a lake of deep stillness, and I just feel like I'm a stone dropping down into the bottom to settle on the bottom of like the lake floor and look up. That there's all of this presence that just wants to be felt. And what is our part of it? How do we want to be a part of it? And does our piece have to be screaming from a mountaintop? Or is visibility actually about just finding the place where you fit? And if it's about finding the place where you fit, will you still be able to then receive what's meant for you and what you want? And to an extent, I feel like the things that we want them because we know that it belongs to us in some way. Like we're always going to want more. We're always going to want to move things. I think I'm noticing just the semantics of prosperity, currency. It's a current. It's meant to move. It needs to flow. There's a circuit to it. If you only take things in and don't let them go, it's stagnant, and that can't work. Like, people build money by letting it build more money, right? Like, there's even a flow in the money that people invest and put aside because they've put it somewhere and it's actively doing something. They don't just, hide it in their closet where it gets forgotten about. Then it's not serving anything. Is it the same with the way that we're showing up? Do we need to not be hiding in closets? Do we need to actually interact in order to have this flow in our life? And I would say probably yes. Yes, we do need to show up. How do we want to show up? Do we want to be kind? Do we want to be solid? Do we want to be steady or audacious? Do we want to be flamboyant? Do we want to be judgmental? Sometimes I do. I'm going to admit it. Sometimes I want to be judgmental, but I actually don't want to be known for that. I just want to be allowed to have those thoughts. Isn't that so silly? But, that's human. That's where I'm at sometimes. And then I want to be a person who doesn't have judgment. Isn't that so funny? Like, we're just so full of contradictions. And maybe that's the crux of the whole thing, right? Like, we have so many contradictions, and yet we believe that in order to be visible, we have to be visible only one way. What if that's not true? What if you get to be visible in all of your ways? What if that's what makes you awesome? What if that's what allows you to have everything you want? And I think, honestly, like, that is abundance, when you're allowed to have all of the things, have all the feelings. And honestly, that actually makes me feel really good to bring that into this particular podcast, because this is the end of the year for me. I think it's this one or the next one is the last recording of the year. And it's about having a full spectrum of feelings, a full spectrum. You get to have them all. And if you don't have them all, like, that's not abundance. That's limitation. That's stagnation. That's pain. Honestly, it's the friction of not having anything happen. Like, it just, it's like, it hurts. So the question for us is, how do we want to show up next year? How are we showing up in our lives? How do we feel abundant, create abundance? Let there be that flow and visibility. And honestly, is it okay if we show up and then we recede and show up and recede? Like, I like that. I like feeling like an ocean where I can, like, roar in and do some crazy things and then just roar back out. And everyone can see me. There I am, just doing my thing. And what if you can too? Wouldn't that be fabulous? Friends, I would love to hear your commentary on this. Please send me a message. Tell me you're listening. Let me know what's going on. And let me know, how do you think about visibility? What's helped you to become more visible? What's helped you to feel more abundant? And let all of that into your life, hopefully with less judgment, hopefully with more ease. And if it's been hard, share that too, because I want to know. Have yourself a fabulous week. Have yourself a fabulous new year. And I will see you next time. Thanks so much for joining me. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and share it with someone you love, and leave us a review. You can learn more and get some self-compassion tips and tricks by visiting coachwithblaze.com, where you can sign up to get my free booklet on overcoming anxiety, overwhelm, exhaustion, and burnout. I'm sending you so much appreciation and love, and I'll see you next time.